How do you define yourself as a leader?
I would say encouraging and challenging. You've put people into roles where you believe they are the best people to do that job. If you give people responsibility or you give them authority, they've got to accept the accountability as well. They are going to make mistakes, just like you've made mistakes yourself. The key is to make sure that if you're going to make mistakes, make them relatively quickly. If you need to reverse a mistake, reverse it quickly and learn from it. That's got nothing to do with seniority to juniors, it's colleagues. If somebody's letting down their team members, that is going to have a corrosive effect, and you need to be able to deal with that.
What would you recommend someone who wants to become a founder, considering that it has become a huge trend?
A huge area that people, I believe, massively underestimate is if you need external funding and you need multiple rounds of external funding as you grow, how are you going to do that? It will take probably 3 times longer than you think it will take, and it will be definitely 3 times harder. Well, if it was easy, everybody would do it, right?
Welcome to another episode of C-Suite Influence Podcast. On this show, we're interviewing regional leaders about their leadership styles and about what makes them leaders as they are. And in this episode, we're talking to Craig Moore. Craig is the founder and the CEO of Beehive, an enterprise company based in Dubai, and is the first DFSA-regulated digital lending platform. Prior to Beehive, Craig was the founder and the COO of Butterfly Software, a UK-based data analytics company that was acquired by IBM. Welcome to this episode and welcome to Podster Studio. Craig, I'm really excited about this conversation. How do you define yourself as a leader? What is your style?
I would say encouraging and challenging. And what I mean by that is I see my role to encourage people. You know, again, you've put people into roles where you believe they are the best people to do that job. I mean, if you use an analogy, I'm the conductor of the orchestra. So I expect everybody to be able to play their instrument better than I could. Yeah. But my job is to, at the end of the day, get the right tune out of the band. So it's important that you've got the people in the roles. But you've got to hold those people to account as well. You know, if you give people responsibility or you give them authority, they've got to accept the accountability as well. And if you've got the right people in those roles, people know when they've messed up or when they're not putting the right effort in or they're shying away from tough decisions, and then that's up to you to be challenging them. That's where the challenging bit comes as well. So I think it's important that you've got to have a bit of kind of, as I say, I guess, an iron fist in the velvet glove at times, because ultimately, if you're still the figurehead for the business, your personal reputation is still very wrapped up with the business, then you carry the can for how the business is perceived, and everybody in that organization needs to understand that they're ambassadors from your juniors all the way up to myself as the founder.
So how do you balance then the need for the big picture, for the next challenge as an entrepreneur, and the day-to-day operations, day-to-day, let's say, absolutely necessary things that the CEO and the founder needs to do? How do you balance that?
I think the way you balance it is by having a good team in place for the day-to-day. Some people, founders of organizations, are very, very maniacal in terms of every aspect of their business. They want to micromanage. I think that can be appropriate in the early days, but once your business gets to a certain size, you've got to trust the people that you've brought on board, because if you don't, you'll never really scale. Right? If you're trying to spread yourself thinner and thinner and thinner across every detail of the business day to day, what you need to do is create structures where you can check in with people. People know they can come to you if they got an issue, or they're just looking, we can go right here or we can go left. What's your views? I think that's really important. But ultimately, you've got to leave people to get on with the job.
And do you do anything special to build that culture? Is it the way you learned who do you hire first? Or is it the way you implement different, I don't know, programs within your companies?
I think it's trial and error. I mean, most entrepreneurs, if they've had a business for any amount of time, will tell you they've made lots and lots of mistakes, right? Whether that's wrong hires, whether that's wrong decisions. And if you've had a business for a period of time and the business has grown to a certain size, you start to become more comfortable with the idea that you have to give people autonomy. They are going to make mistakes, just like you've made mistakes yourself. The key is to make sure that if you're going to make mistakes, make them relatively quickly. Try to then, if you need to reverse a mistake, reverse it quickly, and learn from it. Right? Again, it's the same way an adult will tell a child. You can't castigate the child for doing a mistake in the first time, but if the child keeps doing it and isn't learning from that, then that's where the frustration comes, and that's exactly the same in any team. And that's got nothing to do with seniority to juniors. It's colleagues, right? If somebody's letting down their team members, that is going to have a corrosive effect, and you need to be able to deal with that. So I think it's important that you allow people to enact what they believe is right. I'm a big advocate of the carpenter's rule, right? Measure twice, cut once. So again, if somebody's got, hey, you've got an idea, we want to do this, great. Have you thought it through? Yeah, we've thought it through. You challenge it a few times, go through a period of challenging it, and then, sounds sensible. Okay, fine, let's run with it, right? But, report back if you hit these milestones, or if it's not working, or quite frankly, we're creating a solution for a problem that doesn't exist.
So what was your biggest learning from a mistake over your long entrepreneurial journey?
I'd say it's probably a couple. One is sometimes you can't fight the market, right? So you believe you can have what you believe is a great idea. You can work it up on the whiteboard, then work it up as a business plan, look at all the different angles. You feel it should be self-evident. You then take that to a market, and whether that's cultural, whether that's kind of just the way that business is done there, means you just can't make it happen, right? And it becomes increasingly frustrating because to you it's self-evident, so you keep persevering with it, but actually you're trying to fight a market mentality, and that's very difficult. And I saw that in Southeast Asia. When we looked at, we opened offices there. And tied to that is, in retrospect, I wish I'd have done a JV rather than trying a standalone business in some of those countries, because we brought the tech, we brought the DNA of what we did, a lot of great ideas, but in reality, we probably needed a local partner to help us navigate the kind of cultural aspects and the regulatory landscapes and other things. So, yeah, in hindsight, probably taking 50% of a bigger piece of pie rather than trying to take 100% of what would have been just beehive operations. I think in hindsight was probably the wrong thing.
And how would you recommend, if you can, to those who are in the same kind of circle and they're trying to either fight the market, or they can't admit that probably something has to be changed in this particular situation? How would you recommend to overcome that?
I think you've got to understand that in all business, luck does play a part, and a lot of that comes through timing. Yeah? So certain markets are ready to embrace maybe the product or the offering that you've got, and some aren't. And understanding that and being quite tough on yourself from an introspection perspective, from a kind of candid conversation with your senior team, is to understand, if we go into this market, or if we try to bring this product out, or whatever, is the time right? is the market ready for it? Are people going to pay for this? Yeah. And I think a lot of times people go, no, we've got great ideas, we're going to take this to market. And you can spend an awful lot of money trying to get traction in the market. And sometimes the timing's not right. And then somebody could come along 2 years later with exactly the same offering. In fact, they could have maybe a weaker offering, but they'll get the traction. So timing, never underestimate the importance of timing in markets. And I think that's what we see now, particularly in this region.
Yeah.
You've probably had business ideas that, somebody may have brought that business idea 5 years ago into the market. The market just wasn't ready.
Yeah.
And now somebody's brought it and they're getting huge traction.
That's right. Yeah. And would you recommend to just stop doing that exercise and switch to something else? And how do you define, what do you do next? For example, if you believed in an idea or in a product, but then on the way you realize that the timing is not right, probably the mentality is wrong. So what would you recommend to do at this point of time? Just stop and switch to something else? And how to overcome that particular, you need to shift your own mindset, right?
I think a lot of it comes back to opportunity cost, right? So one of the things that a lot of people miss when they talk about entrepreneurship is, when you become an entrepreneur, there is an opportunity cost lost as well, that you could be maybe having a successful career in corporate or in a large multinational. So not only are you giving up maybe that stability or that pay packet and the experience that you'll build up there, you are typically risking maybe your own money as well. A lot of times, entrepreneur, you're expected to be funding not just your time, but also you may be putting some, hard cash into the business as well. And most investors will look for that. So, how you spend your time becomes incredibly important. So when you've got an idea that maybe the timing's wrong, then you've got a number of options. You either look at a market. Are you willing to move to a market where the timing may be right? If not, are you willing to kind of put that just on the back burner, but maybe work with organizations that have complementary aspects to that? So you could be building up a better understanding, a better network, so that when you do fire this idea back up, you've actually gained a lot more experience in, pitfalls, or how you're going to take that to market, or who you're going to partner with, whatever that may be. Or alternatively, if you've got 3 other good ideas on the shelf, then the opportunity cost is, should you be looking at those? There is no manual for starting a business.
Sure.
There's a lot of people that have, they've got probably 9 out of 10 boxes ticked. But if that 10th box isn't ticked, that can be the difference between a successful business or successful venture and something that fails, right? And you never actually know what that last 10% is, because, as we said, the markets are changing. You could be having an idea that suddenly all the VC money is really interested in, but by the time you bring your product to market, they've moved on, right? Now all they want is AI or something else, right? And suddenly you're sitting there scratching, going, and that's why timing is really important, because timing can also be, you've missed the opportunity, you've missed the market sentiment. So, I think opportunity cost is something that a lot of people probably underestimate.
That's great. Out of your 2 big journeys of building 2 big businesses, so could you elaborate a little bit on what was the difference? And one person, 2 different businesses, right? If you are building 2 companies, let's say, at a different time, are they different, or do you have the same sort of style of being an entrepreneur? And what was the difference between your 2 businesses?
No, I think they evolve. I think that the different experiences. One, a lot of times people say your second business can sometimes be more of a risk than your first business.
Really?
And the reason is, if you've been successful in your first business and you've built a business, you've had an exit, you've been recognized as a successful entrepreneur, then until you do your second business, you never truly know how much of that was luck, timing, or how much of that, and sometimes you can have a kind of overconfidence bias that, well, I've done it once, so surely I can do it again. And that's not really the case. Each business is different. So I would say, the first business, the kind of good thing is you go in with a degree of naivety that means, if you were to ask yourself 2 or 3 years down the journey, would you necessarily start that business? There'll be many a day where you'd say, if I knew what I knew now, I just wouldn't have started this. But then if you're successful and you exit, then all that hard work, all that kind of, those weekends, those late nights, that stress seems worth it. But as I said before, a lot of these things are really fine, because if you get all that way and fail, as in for whatever reason, the business folds or a COVID type thing happens, then that can be quite devastating to get over, because you've done everything what you believe is right, and then circumstances outside of your control have meant that your business is just another business that's failed. And then it's about how do you pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and go again. So the first business, I think there's a degree of naivety. You're finding your way. The learning curve is huge. You start to understand how important it is to maybe hire the right people, how they can make and break an organization. You understand more about business is business and it's not personal, in the sense that you can be maybe looking at partnerships with organizations, large organizations that have many moving parts, and you feel that something is unfair or they've treated you badly. They're just not as emotionally connected to the transaction or the deal as you are. So you start to learn to understand that actually business is business. Yeah. It's not, shaking the hands of somebody over an agreement. So you learn a lot of lessons that way. When I did Beehive, Beehive was a different organization in that we couldn't just start from the get-go. We needed to raise funding in order to put the infrastructure in place, to put the team in place. The first business, Butterfly, was all self-funded. We didn't raise any external money. And that was good in one way because it meant we didn't have to deal with external investment. Whereas Beehive, we went through multiple funding rounds, and that can consume a huge amount of time. And that's got nothing to do with business, but that's actually, without that, you don't have a business.
But what inspired you to start the first company? And then by the time you grew it to a certain degree that it was acquired, what inspired you to start the second one? It'll be interesting to know.
So I think with the first one, again, if I look at my personal journey, when I was younger, I always believed that I would have my own business, that I would start my own business. And at that time, I knew virtually nobody that had that kind of interest. Most people were interested in going into a large corporate, large multinational, getting on the graduate schemes and working their way up through those organizations. So I believe probably at a subconscious level, you're already looking to build up the skills that you feel at some point will help you with your own organization. And before setting up Butterfly, I worked with a senior team of guys that had been bought by Dell. So they'd sold their business. It was a consulting business. But working closely with those guys, you started to see all the mechanics of a smaller organization, but also an organization that has then exited to a larger organization, and what the larger organization is looking for, and the kind of controls and the processes and how it assesses that organization. So you're really at the cutting edge of understanding what works, what doesn't work, what mistakes they've done, etc. And I think that experience gave me the confidence to then say, okay, it's demystified business quite a lot. I mean, business at the end of the day is just a bunch of people trying to, move forward with a product offering and a market or a service offering. So having that degree of demystification, having that understanding that actually if you can get a core team of individuals, then you can launch a business and you can do that effectively. So a lot of it is just taking away the fear, or dampening the fear to a degree where you say, okay, it's worth it now. So I think that's what probably prompted Butterfly. But when I look back now, partly because I was younger, I risked everything financially. Right? I look back at it now and I think, yeah, it's actually quite a lot of risk, but that's where the belief and the passion comes. And you've got to have belief and passion in your offering, because if you don't, then it's very difficult, one, to keep yourself motivated and going, but also it's very, very difficult to motivate others. Yeah.
Absolutely. Are you a risk taker overall? If you
Yes.
look at yourself
Yes.
now over your long entrepreneurial journey, does it help you? Do you think most of the successful entrepreneurs are risk takers?
I think they're all risk takers to a degree, but I think there's a huge variance of degrees in that. If you're 22, 23 years old, you're starting on an entrepreneurial journey, actually failure is not a bad thing. You'll probably learn more in failure than you will in success, potentially. And you're still in that forming stage of your working life, your career. So you can still be a risk taker, but actually, 2 years later, that hasn't worked out. If you're bright, you're personable, you've got skill sets, you're not going to struggle particularly finding a job at 25, 26. I think if you start taking risks later on in your career, then of course you're taking on a bigger opportunity cost risk. If you've been earning a good salary at a large corporate, are you willing to walk away? And I've met a lot of people in probably the last 16, 17 years who are, I'd love to do that, but but I've got this house, and I've got the kids in school, and I've got this, and I've got that. Well, if it was easy, everybody would do it, right? To walk away from a $250,000 job, there's going to be some risk. But if you want to then, it's like going into a casino. It is like going into a casino. You've got to be willing to put the chips down. And the people who are willing to do that, will learn an awful lot from it. The question is, if it doesn't work out, which, let's be honest, 80, I was looking at a stat. So Beehive, we celebrate 10 years this month. I think 5% of businesses make it to 10 years.
Totally.
So, and 50% of startups have probably gone after 2 or 3 years. So the odds are hugely against you.
Yeah.
And you've got to weigh up, is this something that you want to do, and are you willing to risk?
But do you really reflect at the beginning of your journey as an entrepreneur that I really want to do it all my life, or you just do it because you've got a passion for a product, or you've got everything in your hands to just start it off, or you do not have an alternative? So do you think this is a bit of a it's not really something that people probably reflect upon? They just start, those who start and succeed.
Yeah.
They probably start and succeed, right?
Yeah, ultimately it's about action, right? I mean, I've also met people. I remember meeting somebody years ago, funnily enough, before set up Beehive. I met them in the UK, and they'd been working on a similar idea, and they were going to launch it in the UK, and they'd been working on the tech for about 2 years. And the problem was the guy just got so into the weeds of the tech, and he just kept going round and round and round and trying to make it better and better and better and better and better, without ever launching the product and the business. And at some point, you've just got to launch, right? Because first of all, you've got to see if the market actually wants what you're offering. And also, you learn the most from the market. Yeah? If the market doesn't like the way you've position the product, it'll tell you. If the market doesn't like the product, full stop, it will tell you. If the timing's not right, it will tell you. So, but this person just kept going round and round and round and round and round, almost thinking that he de-risks his product by spending that amount of time. But at some point, it's all about action. So, yeah, I think, when you get to the point where you say, right, as they all say, screw it, let's do it, that's when you hold your breath a little and say, okay, here we go. And it's typically not as scary as you think, right? Because you are already in a mindset to start reacting to that and adapting to the market. But, as an entrepreneur, there's nothing more exciting for me than you get on a whiteboard. Somebody comes in to see me. Hey, Craig, we're looking at doing this. Can we do this? What does that look like? Boom, 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 whiteboard. And 30 minutes later, it's like, yeah, fine, go on, run with it.
Nice.
And I think for people that can work in that environment, particularly people who are in their, say, 20s, they're earlier on in their career, the amount of freedom they're given to go and run with something or work something up. I mean, as I say to a lot of my team, with the journey that we're on at the moment, which is, I'm pushing my team quite hard, is to say, guys, you're almost getting paid to do an MBA here. Because if we're launching new products or going into new markets or whatever we're doing, then the learning curve that you will experience from that is huge. Right? It's absolutely huge. And I suspect a bunch of people that work at Beehive will be entrepreneurs themselves in the next 5 to 10 years. Right.
Is this the culture that you're trying to promote? Or can you say that you probably surrounded yourself by individuals who are very similar to your own spirit?
I think you have to have a balance.
Yeah.
You have to have a balance, right? You can't have a bunch of people who are all superstars, for the want of a better word, because as your business grows, first of all, I think when you're putting a team together, a core team, particularly in the early days, is you want to look for people who aren't the same as you. They need to complement you. Right? There's no point having 3 or 4 of me, because then if we're all strong in the same areas, then we're also weak in the same areas. So you need to get a balance with that. And then when you get, when your organization grows, then you need a balance between people who are innovative, risk takers, creatives, change agents, but also people who, quite frankly, like the environment. They want to come in the morning, they want to do a good job, and they want to leave in the evening, right? And they just want steady, kind of stable employment, because, typically they're the people that won't give you much on the HR side, right? Because they're kind of content at what they're doing. Whereas when you have people who are, I want to be here in 3 years' time, it's whether your organization can manage their expectations or whether they're going to have to leave at some point in order to realize those expectations, or whether they are probably being unrealistic in those expectations. And then over time, they will learn that, they probably have a bit more to learn before they're able to get to that level.
That's interesting, and thank you for this insight, because we, on this particular podcast, we talk about, how to grow the team and the business, not only the business, but also the team. What do you think? What makes a great leader?
I think leadership changes over time. So again, if you're 2, 3, 5 people, a leader is somebody that sleeves are rolled up, you're in the trenches. Leadership and management, more or less one of the same. However, leadership, I think even at the start, well, particularly at the start, but all the way through the journey of an organization, it's incumbent on a leader to be able to paint a narrative that excites people and gives an objective that people can rally around. Because if I look at my job now, my job isn't management. Right? My kind of senior team will do the management, the day-to-day management, and the team below them will manage, and the team below them will manage. So it's not really about the management. But what I have to do is I have to paint a picture of, listen, this is the challenge for the next 2 or 3 years. This is what we need to achieve. We're going to break that down as to how we're going to achieve that and what steps we're going to take. And then you guys are going to implement that. But if they don't believe in the journey and the destination in the first place, they're not going to become committed and involved in what's the process we need to do, what are the steps we need to do, and I think that's what's really important in leadership. So it goes from probably being 50% leadership, 50% management in the early days to becoming 80-90% leadership of somebody that can inspire people, can excite people from this is the next stage of the business. Yeah.
Have you felt sort of this transition from initially being the founder to actually becoming a CEO? Have you taken any mentorship or you learned yourself?
I'd say predominantly learned myself. I guess as you become more senior in your career, a lot of your friendship group are also senior. So when you're talking and exchanging notes, you're also picking up cues and things that have worked and things that haven't worked. So I think there's an element where you're getting informal mentoring, even if it's from colleagues, from kind of contemporaries. But also, if I look at probably the main mentorship for me was coming into this market, because having left the last business when we sold to IBM and setting up Beehive, I hadn't worked in region. Mm-hmm. So my chairman, a guy called Rick Pudner, was fantastic in mentoring me in understanding the region and the markets and the kind of regulatory landscape, because he was an ex-banker. So that was particularly important. So I didn't really need entrepreneurial mentorship, but I needed mentorship of a different kind in helping me understand and hopefully cut out some of the mistakes or the shortcut and take advantage of shortcuts.
If you had a chance to get any mentor in the world, who would that be? Anybody?
I think it would be more probably somebody in the sports management arena. So I think when you're looking at an organization and how do you that kind of leadership, that build, that mix of personalities, I think there's a lot to be learned from the sports arena. So somebody's been exceptionally successful in management in various sports.
Is it because of the spirit?
Yeah, I think it is. I think particularly when you face tough times, challenging times, that's a lot of when those type of people make the difference. So yeah, I think you could learn a lot from the sports arena, the siege mentality, what do you do when confidence is low, morale is low, how do you turn that around? And I think there's huge overlaps between business and sport.
Do you have anything to share from that perspective? Like, definitely overgrowing 2 companies, you probably came through different times, right? And together with your team. So what is your biggest learning through bringing your team through the tough times?
I think the toughest time that most people probably had, and certainly was our toughest time, was COVID. So when COVID hit, it hit our business particularly hard, purely because lending is a confidence business. And when the world is losing confidence over a global pandemic, then it's very difficult to kind of navigate that. And it was very important to be transparent and have a very honest conversation with the organization to say that we've been dealt a hand, completely external. We've got 2 choices about how we deal with this. And it was really about people needed to buy into the solution. The solution, we're going to have to cut salaries, we're going to have to We're really going to have to pull together. Everyone's got to kind of be in it. The alternative, of course, is we let a bunch of people go in order to reduce the kind of cash burn that we had. And I think once people understand, but you've got to give them some hope as well. You can't just say it's tough and it's going to continue to be tough and we can't see any end to this, because you want those people fighting for the business, but you also want those people believing they're fighting for something that is going to survive and they're going to come out of this. So it was really important not only to be delivering hey, this is the situation, this is where we are today, but this is why we believe we will come out of this, and this is why we believe that the steps that we're taking will be temporary. And the salary reductions were all brought back to the staff before they were brought back by the senior team. So it's about saying you're going to do something, doing it, and people knowing that you did what you said you were going to do. So and it's a balancing act, right? Because COVID was an unusual global event. Other situations you wouldn't necessarily share the state of the business with all the team, because whilst people think, it's great, you should be transparent, yeah, but it's also confidence. So if I think back at times at Butterfly, we were weeks away from running out of cash or not being able to pay the wage bills. And if you tell people that, yes, on the face of it, it's like, oh yeah, but you're being honest with them. What's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to start looking for a new job. It's natural. They have to take care of themselves, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So,
they get worried.
So straight away, you're already creating the situation that you fear the most, which is there'll be an exodus to the door, the business will suffer, the business won't be able to turn around, and then we've materialized our own fear. So it's a balancing act as to when you're transparent, when you're open with the wider team, or when you have to contain information in order to keep morale up and keep people focused. And that's what ultimately the senior team's there to do, is to make the big calls and to take the weight of the kind of wider stress of the business.
Do you think this culture is built because of the personality of the CEO or leader or founder, or because of the skills and experience that the company have been able to gain overall?
I think it's probably a combination. Again, I think if people don't believe in the senior leadership, or they don't believe in the targets or the destination or the ambition, then it's very difficult for them to be motivated as soon as you hit the first hurdle, first problem. So it has to come from the top, but also you have to have the right kind of people in the roles that are built of the type of, okay, sleeves rolled up, yeah, we're going to do this. Because if they believe in that vision or believe in that destination, they're more likely to, the key to commitment is involvement. And if they feel involved in the success of the business or the success of the journey, then they're a lot more committed. Yeah. And again, I'm very transparent with people that will come to the organization at times, and I may say, yeah, you might work here for 2 to 3 years, right? Because I already see that you maybe then want to branch out on your own or go and build up skill sets in another organization as part of your development and journey. And that's fine, because if you know that you've got those people for 2 or 3 years, then you want them to be able to slot in and do a role for the business. But you're also kind of magnanimous enough to know that actually, they will be leaving the business at some point. And again, that's a balancing act, because in the early days, we had really, when we were probably 20 people as a business, we hardly had any turnover. But after a while, you need a degree of turnover, right, in your organization, because it's healthy. Sometimes you need change agents to shake things up, to get people out of the kind of comfort zone.
Yeah.
Right. And that changes whether you're 20 people or 10 or 20 people, 50 people or 100 people. what you do and how you do that changes depending on the size of the business and the type of personalities that you want in the business.
So, but would you agree that probably you need a certain type of people and employees, or considering to be your senior team, right? At the beginning, when your business is just starting to grow, and by the time business evolves and gets more stable, probably you need a different type of people as a majority. And a question, consequently, how do you really need to keep those, risk takers who took with you, or do you want them to go and build their own businesses? How do you overcome that competition within the senior team then, and how do you keep those who you really want to keep?
So I think that, it probably breaks down into two areas. One is, even as an organization grows, there can be new projects, new things that excite people. So a lot of times if you've got people who are more creative, they get excited by doing new things, then if your business is looking to expand, they are the people that you'll typically put on point for those kind of initiatives. Yeah. So you can keep those people motivated. But obviously as the organization grows and there's more day-to-day kind of cranking the machine, then you don't want those type of people in those type of roles because they'll get bored. Yeah. So I think, if you're trying to move forward all the time as a business, then you can keep a number of creative people. What happens on the other side is if people are looking to leave, that is something you should always be aware of. And one of the difficult things for startups and early organizations, there's an expression, you're one deep at the bar, right? So somebody leaves and you've got a huge gap. And it can at times lead you to make the wrong decisions, right? You kind of buy that person back. You don't want them to leave. You pay them more money. But if their head's gone, their head's gone. They might stick around for another 4 or 5 months. And the danger is that you haven't built up cover for that part of the organization. And that's a tough lesson. But the reality of the situation is nobody should be bigger than the business. Nobody should be indispensable, and I even include myself in that. So it's one of the things you start to learn is you either need people that can cover multiple roles, or you have a strategy. If X walks out the door tomorrow, what will we do, right? And typically as a business, you manage. Yeah. People rally round, people pull it together. Like most things in life, you tend to worry about things that haven't happened a lot more than, when they actually do happen, you just deal with them. They're just another issue to be dealt with. So for a lot of, I think that was a big learning as well, is you need to understand that that's the risk that comes with the creatives as well, is the creative can walk into your office one day and say, I'm out of here. Yeah. And the wrong thing typically is to try to make them stay and try to pay them more money, because they may say it's money. It's not typically money. It's the challenge isn't there, or they're just ready to move on to the next challenge. And you're better working with them on an exit plan rather than trying to, buy them back or pay more money that you may not have. And that's a balancing act.
Have you ever, do you remember any big mistake that you did with hiring or with people, something like that? So what was your biggest mistake or learning that relates to your hiring wrong or trying to keep for a long time somebody who wanted to leave?
Yeah, I think most most entrepreneurs would say that they don't fire quick enough. And I say this to my management team at times. I say, look, everybody likes to hire, right? Everybody likes to be the nice person that's offering somebody a job, that's super excited and coming on board, or new managers that are building their team out because you've remember, it's typically in startups that you have a massive growth in headcount as a percentage very quickly. You go from 10 people to 20 people. You've just doubled the size of the organization. Emirates Airlines hire 100 new people. It's a drop in the ocean. Yeah? You hire 20, 30 people. It's a huge issue. It's a huge thing, but also it can be a huge issue as well, because you're bringing a lot of people on very quickly. You've got to ensure that doesn't disrupt your day-to-day operations. How are those people going to be brought up to speed? Who's going to train them? Right? What happens to the productivity of the people that's training? So you got to consider a whole bunch of stuff. So everybody likes to be doing the hiring bit, but the firing bit is, when management will come to you, or I've had people that report to me, and you think they're not, and your gut is telling you they're not going to be able to deliver, right? They're saying the right things. They can be really nice people. You get on with them personally. But deep down, they're not right, or it isn't going to work out. The problem is the human side of you probably keeps those people too long. And that's a real challenge for startups and early stage businesses. And it's a challenge for two reasons. One, it's obviously costing you money. Yeah, and typically as a startup, you may be funded from external monies, so therefore you've got a runway of a certain amount, and every bit of spend is critical. But secondly, the more important thing is the opportunity cost. You could have somebody else sat in that seat doing the job that you need doing, and the longer you delay, the more it's going to hurt your business. So you almost become conflicted between at a kind of human level versus what's right for the business. Because if you were watching this as a dispassionate third party, you're watching a film and you saw this, you'd go, right, you get rid of that person tomorrow. But that's, real life isn't the same as a film. So, I think I've definitely been guilty of keeping people a lot longer than should have done. I don't think that's particularly unusual in a lot of organizations. When you look back, you become frustrated. Typically those people go on and, they get a perfectly good job and they're happy and there's no real animosity. And you think, I could have pulled that lever 6 months earlier. Why didn't I? So there are always lessons you're trying to learn from, but even when it's right, it's still difficult to do, because the belief is that they'll turn it around. And 9 times out of 10, if not 99 times out of 100, the gut is nearly always right.
Thank you for your honesty with this insight and the answer, actually. So I've got a couple of more questions to cover. Say, somewhere at the beginning, we touched upon the subject of, that sometimes, especially in our region, the fundraising could take the entire amount of time from a founder. So if we get back to that particular point, what kind of recommendation would you give to someone who is becoming a founder currently in our region? So what would you recommend someone who wants to become a founder, considering also that it has become a huge trend?
It has, and I think the first thing I'd always say to anybody who wants to become a founder is think long and hard, right? If this is what you want to do, because, as I said, not only have you got the opportunity cost of maybe walking away from a corporate career, and for most entrepreneurs, they will earn less in their lifetime than they would in a high-flying corporate job. So that's one thing. Particularly when you look at this region, right? When you've got no income tax, that's even more of an incentive to particularly work in, to reach seniority in a corporate job. But when you're looking at, do I want to go on an entrepreneurial journey? Yeah, I think a lot of people have to hugely consider, right, how am I going to fund this venture? How do we do this? Because yes, how do I create a product or a service? What's the market like? How am I going to build a team? They're all part of the business plan. Yeah? But a huge area that people, I believe, massively underestimate is if you need external funding and you need multiple rounds of external funding as you grow, how are you going to do that? Because that consumes so much of a founder's or co-founder's time and brings an awful lot of emotional up and downs, stress, and I don't think it's talked about enough, if I'm honest. So I would say to somebody, you need to, as you start with that journey, understand the investment network, understand the landscape, understand how you will communicate with that landscape. If you've got your business idea and you've got that rocking and rolling, then how do you create, a quarterly update of some milestones that you're achieving that you just send out, right? You send out to many different, if you look at VCs, particularly early stage VCs, they want their ear to the ground. They want to understand what's happening, what the accelerators are doing or the incubators are doing. So spend some time around the incubators and the accelerators because they can do some of those introductions into that network. Try to understand some of the lessons learned from early stage founders. What kind of panned out that you thought it would pan out like, but also what didn't. Don't underestimate, and when you talk about things like funding, it will take probably 3 times longer than you think it will take. Yeah? And it will be definitely 3 times harder than you think it will take. So you've got to be realistic about that as well. And the other thing I would say, which I think happens to an awful lot of entrepreneurs, and I never really hear this covered whenever I kind of listen to podcasts or read books, is don't be hugely fixated on percentage ownerships. Focus more on how big can you create the pie. Yeah? How quickly can you build the business? How much enterprise value you can create? Because people become hugely fixated. And we go back to what I said before about timing, right? If you've got an opportunity and the timing is right, you've seen this particularly in some of the large US organizations. Somebody gets the timing right, they get the funding right, then the enterprise value is hugely created. And rather than trying to own 85% or 90% of something that is going to struggle to grow or is going to almost grow at an organic level, when you've got the opportunity to turbocharge a business, but you're going to have to give away a bit more, weigh those up, right? Because if your business is going to be a bit more of a slow burn, you're going to develop product for a while, yeah, okay. At that point, you might be pre-revenue, so you don't necessarily need to be taking too much money up front because you're developing product. If what you're trying to do is go to market very quickly, you've got everything set up, what you then need is the fuel. You need the fuel to go to market quickly, build momentum, and then continue to accelerate. And I see a lot of times people become, they almost become, penny wise, pound foolish, right? So they're more focused on about, I own X% of this business and, on paper I'm worth ABC. Actually, it's all paper money until you have some form of exit or kind of commercial event. And what you've got to be focused on is building the best business that you can build, the enterprise value. You should never do it for the money. If you're successful, the money will follow. Right, but if you focus on the money or you focus on you're not focused on the business and doing the best, everything else will take care of itself, right? And again, you still want to enjoy what you do,
Totally.
Right? You still want to enjoy what you do. So, I know it's an old adage, but money won't in itself make you happy. It'll give you more options, but it won't in itself make you happy. So if you're not excited when you get up in the morning, you're not kind of motivated, and you can't motivate others, then you're going to struggle. You're just going to struggle to build what you want to build, and that will start to kind of depress you and pull you down, right, and demotivate you. Whereas if you can see an exciting opportunity and you can action it, and you can take funding and say, right, this is fantastic. Now, we're accelerating, we're getting faster and faster and faster, we're growing, we're taking advantage of the timing, then that's what you should be focused on.
So, first of all, thank you very much for this absolutely insightful, deep conversation with lots of sort of information and a lot of reflections that have not been on this podcast before. So thank you very much for that.
Welcome.
And I want to ask you one thing now. So after listening to this episode, what do you want the audience to do when they hear about Beehive, when they hear about you, about your previous business, whatever? So what do you want the audience to do?
I'd say just reflect, right? Reflect if entrepreneurship, being a founder, is the right thing for you and it's what you want to do, or it's the right thing at this moment in time. Again, I go back to some of my team members who are probably in their late 20s, early 30s, and they're still at Beehive because they're learning and they're continuing to learn, and they've got a steep learning curve, but they enjoy being challenged. They enjoy being able to sit with the senior team and debate ideas and be given a lot of autonomy run with ideas. And for those people, will they leave? Yeah, at some point, but they're still learning. So I think for them, they're doing the right thing. Whereas for others, they may feel, right, I believe I've got most of the skill set that I need, or probably more importantly, I know 2 or 3 other people that I can pull together as a core team, and we believe now that the timing is right for what we've got, and we want to start working up our propositions. But at some point, I think whenever you've got a core team, you've got to have people that are prepared to get all in. Mm-hmm. Right? Be wary of people who say, well, I'll work with my job, and then what I'll do is I'll do a bit of work in the evenings and at the weekends. Very quickly, that will become a point of division, right? Because not everybody is as committed. Not everybody is taking the same kind of risks. And you need an alignment of values, an alignment of ambition. And if you get those, then you've typically got a good team.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.